You're listening to Coffee with Quacks with Ivy Lane and Chris Henderson. These are conversations with our favourite interesting quacks. Experts who threaten the mainstream narrative with their interest and skill in genuinely helping humans improve their lives in modern times. This podcast is purely for entertainment purposes only, and anything discussed should not be taken as health advice. Welcome to Coffee with Quacks, episode 2. Today we're talking to Christina Mesic, who is a cold therapy expert and does breath work at the Wim Hof method.
Yeah.
So welcome, Christina.
Thanks for having me, Ivy.
So Chris is going to ask the questions today. We're going to take it in turns. So away to you, Chris.
Thanks, Ivy. And yes, thanks, Christina, for coming on. We met last year, I think it was. I was looking for a Wim Hof experience, and Christina facilitated that. It was a beautiful property, and we did 3 hours of breath work and yoga, and then we did the immersion. It was like 2 minutes in the ice, and it was amazing. And I actually won. She had a raffle, and I won Wim Hof's book on the day, and then I began to do some breath work just in the morning. And learning how to do that, which was really good. And it's the same story that you integrate some stuff, then you forget it and it falls away, then you come back to it. So I'm looking forward to attending another one of your workshops pretty soon, which you're having, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that on this podcast. So maybe we just start with your own story, your backstory in relation to how the reasons why you came across the Wim Hof method and how you got into it and how it's helped you and why. So maybe start there with, what was the story with you in terms of, what you were looking for and how you came across it?
Well, I think as it is common with most stories, there's a bit of like falling sick, feeling powerless and wanting to help oneself come out of a powerless situation. And mine specifically was the fact that my body was deteriorating due to an unsustainable work schedule and a very stressful position in Brisbane City. So I was traveling 4 hours a day to get to Brisbane, working in a corporate role for an oil and gas company. And we lost a team member. We were in a small team of 5. Our team came down. We were down to 4. And I think I was overworked and stressed out. And I'd been saving up my holidays for a month-long Euro trip. And a couple of days into my holiday, I started falling really sick with the chest infection. And it took about a couple of weeks by the time my fever reached 40 degrees and my teeth were chattering and my body was shaking, shivering. I was in a really bad state. So my aunt made me see her doctor. Her doctor diagnosed me with a pneumonia. And I was on antibiotics for about a week by the time I got to Australia and saw my doctor. And what was really alarming is when my doctor ran his own set of tests, my blood oxygen saturation was reading 82. And I didn't know that below 80, your brain can start to shut down certain organs because there's not enough oxygen to sustain all of your bodily organs and functions in life. So hearing that was really alarming. I went to the doctors as it was recommended by the doctor in Europe to have a follow-up and make sure that I'm getting better. And I was going there with the question of, am I all right to go to work? And he said, God, no, you're in a really bad state. You shouldn't even be getting out of bed, which was why I was getting these fainting spells as well when I was walking around. So after 4 months, a month off work, per doctor's orders, I was bedridden and trying to get better. And another one of my tests, my oxygen saturation read 117 when the normal level is 15 to 20. And the sedimentation rate of my red blood cells was 117. So the fact that I couldn't go to work. I was bedridden, sick. I had troubles walking without feeling dizzy. I got on the internet and I looked up, how do I help? How do I support the immune system, and how do I reduce inflammation? Because a pneumonia is inflammation in the lungs that's preventing the oxygen from penetrating down your trachea and through your bronchioles into the alveoli sacs to then enter your bloodstream through your red blood cells. So I looked up, how do I reduce inflammation? How do I support the immune? And I fell on Wim Hof, and I thought, oh, some breathing exercises, this should be good for my lungs, but there's no way I'm willing to try the cold, because my story, my paradigm was that the cold didn't agree with me. I had already had 2 pneumonias. I had bronchitis and strep throat, I think every year since the age of 5 growing up in Canada. So I started out with the breath work, and the very first time I tried to do the Wim Hof breathing protocol, which consists of some deep breathing, a retention, and then a recovery breath. And the first time I tried holding my breath while suffering of a pneumonia, I held my breath for 1 minute and 45 seconds. And I was mind blown. I thought, how is this even possible? I don't understand, because this breath hold was done after an exhalation. I didn't even hold my breath in. So I was like, how does this work? So that got me looking into the science, more interviews, more podcasts. I was wanting to know, how does this stuff work? And in doing so, I realized that there's a lot of credibility backing up the benefits of the cold therapy. And as much as my story, my paradigm was, I'm from Timmins, Ontario, Canada, it hits minus 45 degrees in winter. The cold doesn't agree with me. Well, organically, by doing my own research, I was like, I'm curious about the cold. And so it would have been 2-3 months of just breath work when one day I decided I was really frustrated working from home. I got into an argument with an engineer at work, and I decided to do breath work followed by cold exposure in my pool in Boca Arena. We're talking like, August 2019, about 18, 19 degrees. So not what you'd consider an ice bath, but it was uncomfortable. It was cold, and combining the breath and the cold water, I felt I felt euphoric, and I felt light, and I felt happy, when moments before I'd been really frustrated after, a disagreement, as I mentioned, with an engineer. So feeling firsthand what everyone's going crazy about, I'm like, oh my gosh, I started telling everyone about it, everyone at work, all of my colleagues, my friends, my family members. And it was on the morning of November 6th when I was taking a train into Brisbane City, and I was speaking to my best friend in Canada, who told me that she was losing her battle to anxiety and depression. And I said, you've got to try the Wim Hof method, because it's been helping me with my anxiety. I started doing it wanting to heal my lungs. Lo and behold, it's like a happy pill. You're feeling frustrated, you're feeling anxious, you've got before a big presentation, and my heart's going out of control. I do suffer from a little bit of social anxiety, and sometimes I feel like my nerves are getting the better part of me. And when I have the luxury of doing breath work at home, if I am doing a presentation on my computer, it just resets my system, puts me to calm. So November 6th, taking the train to Brisbane City, my best friend said, I'm not doing well. I said, you've got to try this. She said, I'm desperate. I'll try just about anything. However, I think like her, there was a bit of hesitation with the cold. She's from home. She knows about the cold. It's really hard to convince a Canadian who lives in the cold 6 months out of a year to go and do an ice bath. But this made me want to gain more of that credibility, more of that knowledge, so that I could not only help my friends, colleagues, family members, but also the greater public. So I found out about the Wim Hof method. June 2019 when I was sick, and I registered to become an instructor in November. And it was about a year and a half later when I became certified. And I've been doing this just as a side gig, as a passion. I found my some purpose and some meaning outside of my day to day. However, I did. After working that job for 4 years, as well as teaching Wim Hof, as well as helping a friend who needed a favor whilst traveling abroad to aid her father who was sick, I had a bit of a burnout. This was August last year, so I stopped teaching for, I took a 5-month break, I think it was, and then I taught January and March, and shortly after Australia opened up, allowed unvaccinated people to travel, that's when I left last year. So I've been on a bit of a slowing down the pace and enjoying life, catching up with family, filling up my cup. But I'm back in Australia on the 30th of January, and I'm having my first workshop on the 4th, because the show must go on. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. No, it's such an amazing story, because I remember having pneumonia when I was in my middle 20s, and I was in bed for like 2 weeks and I had to be on antibiotics, for a period of time, and it stripped my gut of good bacteria, and it actually got another recurring virus after that. I was off work for like 2 months, and that really precipitated the second autoimmune condition that came on. So, it's amazing. Like we rail against the internet sometimes, but just to do a search and then to find, Wim Hof in the Google search, maybe that's before they were, did too much SEO tracking and stuff, and you could find stuff on there that was pertinent to you. But I love this story. Maybe draw out a little bit about, who is Wim Hof, because I know people can search him on the internet, and this talks about quacks, and sometimes because it's a little bit out there, people sort of, they can put him in a box and say, this guy's crazy, right? But can you explain what drew you to him? Because he's got a backstory as well, right? That is quite amazing.
So it genuinely was a Google search for lowering inflammation and supporting the immune that made me fall onto Wim Hof. And the first documentary I watched about him is called Transcendence. It's on Gaia, Gaia, the network. And they were looking at alternative therapies for self-healing, and I saw Wim Hof on the show, and he was talking about taking cold showers. And so it started with Transcendence, that documentary that I found, that where I learned about Wim Hof and the method, and I saw Wim and his kooky ways. And then there's 2 other documentaries that are really, really popular for anyone wanting to know about Wim Hof. There's Becoming the Iceman and the Vice documentary. Those both documentaries are about 45 minutes long, and watching them and seeing everyday people without any training being able to do ice baths in the documentary. They were doing it up to 10 minutes, but that's not recommended for anyone starting out. But I think watching a lot of documentaries and also joining the Facebook community group, I'm seeing people of all ages from all different backgrounds doing cold therapy. And so my mental block of the cold doesn't agree with me, it's not for me. Seeing these brave faces, gray hair, limping, whatever, all these different backgrounds and stories and ailments being aided by it. So Wim's popularity, a couple documentaries got me sucked in. I started watching more, and I think it's one thing to have Wim do it, but when you watch people from all ages, adults, elderly, young adults, I think that's what I found was really inspirational, to know that anyone can do it. It's not just Wim, this over the top, charismatic daredevil guy who, he's reached 28 World Guinness record. So it's easy for anyone to look at him and go, well, of course he can do an ice bath. He's climbed Kilimanjaro and Everest in shorts. But it's the other stories of just people from everyday society doing it and healing themselves. That was really motivating, and so was the science.
And he also started his journey out of pain, right? Because he lost his wife to suicide.
Yeah.
He had 4 kids, and you know, he was in a park one day, right? And he just went into the water and felt this stillness and calmness. So there's this like painful backstory that he's like, now, you know, all the YouTube influencers are coming to his house and he's teaching these young guys how to do breathing, breath work, and ice and things like that. So it's an amazing, you can find him on YouTube. There's no problem with that. I'm intrigued with how you, I guess what we want to draw out is you can look at that, but it's deciphering it down to the very basics and where people can start. And it would start with breath work, right? Like, you wouldn't necessarily go into cold. How would you explain how people could start? Like, where can they start? Like, if they're bedridden or like you were, where's the easiest place to start after you've been motivated and ramped up by looking at all these amazing, you know, motivating videos and things? Because that can sometimes be overwhelming, right? Like, oh, do I need to go straight into the ice? Where can you start at the very basic level?
So in touching on Wim's story, where he started, like, I just want to say that people start for different reasons. Some people might start looking for a way to help with chronic pain. Someone else might be doing it for anxiety. With Wim started it because of grief. Well, Wim used it and discovered how powerful it was after the death of his wife, Alaya. She killed herself in 1995. So Wim had started cold therapy at the age of 17, but after suffering great loss, he turned to the cold as a means of healing his broken heart, because his wife had left him alone with their 4 children, and she was the love of his life. And when you're in the cold water, if whether it be stress or grief or famine, whatever's going through your head when you're under an ice bath, thoughts disappear and you jump straight into fight or flight, and the mind and body are connected. So a lot of people will turn to the Wim Hof method hoping, I find it's people are looking to benefit themselves or give themselves a bit of an edge, you know, with athletes to reduce inflammation and stuff like that. Now, where people start, for me, I find it's quite common for people to start with the breath work. The cold is really scary, and because it's such a scary, daunting feat, that's why it's got such great mental benefits, and it helps with resilience and courage. So when it comes to the breath work, where would you start? There's a really short, helpful tutorial video on Wim Hof's website on YouTube. It's 10 minutes long, and he teaches you how to do the protocol, which consists of 30 to 40 deep breaths. And on your last breath, you exhale, and then you hold your breath until you feel the urge to breathe. And when you feel the urge to breathe, you take a deep breath in and you hold for 15 seconds and you let go. So that's one round. People starting out, the majority feel really relaxed after doing breath work, but for some people, it can induce a little bit of panic, a little bit of stress. People who are prone to anxiety or to panic attacks especially might, it might be a really strong sensation, but it's a welcome sensation because you're feeling that panic, you're feeling that stress, but it's in a completely safe setting. So people are learning to feel that, to know I'm okay, and to come out of that. So breath work is a nice way to start. And if you're starting out, the breath work can be intense, and breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth can sort of lessen the intensity of the breath work. Whereas breathing in through the mouth, out through the mouth, and doing so really rapidly can really intensify what you feel in the breath work, which can include temperature change in the skin. You might feel a little bit of muscle spasms. You might feel a bit of lightheadedness, a bit of pressure change. So if you go about it too hard, with a little bit of ego and competition, so I'm going to show everyone I'm going to hold my breath longer than them, or that's how you get hurt. So anyone who's starting out, we would suggest in through the nose, out through the mouth, doing it slowly. Yeah, and then as for the cold, for me, what worked was finding out the science, finding out how it works, and actually reading about all these cases, all these anecdotes of people, how they feel, how it's helped them. That piqued my intrigue for me to go, oh, maybe I want to try a little bit of cold exposure. So in Australia, I would suggest only during the winter months to try cold showers. And you start off warm, and at the end of your shower, you turn it on to cold. If it's a little bit intense for you, you might want to adjust by placing the limbs in first and then bringing your whole body underneath the shower. But what's especially important is to get the back of the neck under the water, because then you stimulate the vagus nerve. So a 30-second cold shower is a good way to start to get used to the cold shock. And then you might find that after doing that for a few weeks, you don't really feel it anymore. And my next step, I chose to go to, you can find some cold pools sometimes locally if you live in a bigger city. So on the Sunshine Coast, we've got TLC Recovery. Their cold pool is kept between 12 to 14 degrees. So my stepping stone after doing cold showers and cold pool plunges at 18, 19 degrees, I went to TLC, and after that I started doing ice baths at home. But I don't like the idea about buying ice and having all that waste, all that plastic. So I would fill up containers of Tupperware with water and make giant ice cubes with it, and I would have one ice bath a week with all the ice that I was able to accumulate throughout the week. So yeah, that would be my suggestion on someone who's starting out. And sorry for whizzing through Wim's story, but it is an important one to tell. And yeah, he found the method to be really powerful in helping to cure his broken heart.
Nice.
Can I ask you,
Ivy, Ivy, come in. You got a question?
with Christina, with lung issues, how damaged can lungs be to be able to, so say if someone had emphysema and severe oxygen deprivation, would they be able to start at the level you did, or is there more of an intro sort of to go through?
Anyone who's suffering from lung condition, lung disease, we wouldn't suggest to be doing this deep breath work. You're struggling to breathe out as it is. It's not a good idea. So this is something that you do. Like I was sick with a pneumonia. I got on antibiotics for a week. I was in Australia for a couple of weeks bedridden when I found out about the Wim Hof method. And by the time I was trying my breath work, I was able to breathe without wheezing, without mucus, without coughing. Although still it wasn't 100%, I made it part of my recovery. But emphysema is a different, you mentioned emphysema, right? And I think emphysema isn't like a lung infection. It's something you're born with.
The alveoli is actually damaged. Yeah. So it's, so is there like an intro that you can start with, or would you start with something like cold therapy, or is it just too risky?
So anytime someone's asking for like a prescription, like how many minutes, there is no answer, because every body is unique and everyone's going to take it differently. The protocol is 30 to 40 deep breaths, hold, and then a recovery breath. So you can do 30 instead of 40. That's a way of bringing it down. But if when you're doing it, it's not feeling good for you, it's not feeling right, then I'm not really familiar with the condition emphysema, but I know that when your body is sick and suffering, we don't suggest doing the method. And yeah, if for me, it was part of my post recovery after my lung infection.
I was just saying that, you know, it's good to go into the depths of different conditions, and I'm sure like there's different studies people can look at, and Christina references different studies in relation to, you know, you've got to get some guidance too, right? Like, don't just jump in. Sometimes we have to and jump on the internet, but it worked for you, but always, you know, reach out to a trained professional like yourself. And then there's obviously other Wim Hof instructors that have had experience. And you're not talking to you, Christina, you're not super, what's the word, like precious about just coming to you, right? On the coast, there's 3 or 4 different Wim Hof instructors that may have different knowledge and different experience. I know Wim Hof was actually on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland just prior to Christmas, and he was going around different retreats. So he was doing lectures. So you'll always find someone with the knowledge to tap into something. I mean, I'm super keen to get, yeah.
What I'm finding with specific cases, it's really good to go. The Wim Hof book has a lot of specific cases of people that have been helped with this method, as well as a Facebook group. But
Yeah.
I would never go as to say, oh, the Wim Hof method cures this off the back that it helped one person. Rather, I'm going off what's been scientifically proven. And we've got that it helps the immune system. It helps to increase your metabolic efficiency. And the studies that were done with actual medical cases, there was psoriasis, and there was axial spondyloarthritis,
Which is a condition I have. So I was like super,
Right.
super keen on looking at that. Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
they're actually researched proper scientific studies. Like he's gone to universities to do those studies. So it's not, you know, we talk quackery, like
Yeah, that's right. This isn't quackery.
quackery, the word has been weaponized against us, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's that's why we're doing this podcast, to try for people to understand what quackery actually is. But I remember watching Wim, and he was saying, look, people think I'm crazy, so I'm going to use science, proper science and studies and double-blind randomized placebo stuff to get my word out. And on that, can you explain the one that he did? Because I'm super intrigued by this. Ivy would be too if she hasn't seen it, but where he got them to inject bacteria into his bloodstream, and a group he was working with, right? Can you explain that one? Because that's the main one I saw.
Yeah. Oh, and Ivy, were you going to say something?
No, she wants to hear it.
No, I'm just like very looking forward to this. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah. So this study, which was published in 2014 by a university in the Netherlands, they took 2 groups of participants. One of them the experiment first started with Wim, who claimed I can influence my immune system. So the university injected him with a dormant form of E. coli, which is called an endotoxin. And hundreds of participants before that were injected with this endotoxin had fevers, tremors, body aches, some of them even puked. So you've got flu-like symptoms for about several hours. Hundreds of people all had this result. And then Wim, who claims I can influence my immune system, they go, all right, let's see what you've got. Injected him with E. coli and nothing happened. So the researchers, the doctors were all like stumped, like, okay, can anyone do this? Can you train someone else to replicate these results? And he said, absolutely. And I said, how long would you need? About a year. He said, no, days. So it only took him about 4 days of training people with breath work, with cold exposure, and some yoga. And they went to the same university, replicated the experiment where they were injected with E. coli, and all the participants that Wim trained they were all able to shrug off the symptoms. If there were any symptoms, it was just minor for the few that did show anything. Whereas the group that Wim didn't train, the immune system flared up like everyone else, fevers and inflammation and shaking and sweats and just really sick for 7 hours. So that was really cool. But what's even cooler is that off the back of that study, the same researchers, Dr. Mattis Cox, Kox, they replicated that experiment, but they had people just do breath work, just do cold, and then do both to see which one had the greater impact on influencing the immune system. Would you like to have a guess which one it was?
Cold would work better.
It was the breath work that had the greatest impact on the immune system. I also thought it was the cold, but if you think about it, the body can survive a few weeks without food, a few days without sleep, a mere few minutes without air. So when you think about which is the greater stress on the body, cold or air, you can tough it out longer in an ice bath than you can without a breath of air. So that causes a greater fight or flight. There's a greater rush of adrenaline that goes into the body from the breath, even though you get a whole bunch from the ice bath as well. There's even more from the breath. And so from the results, they can show that when it came to the pro-inflammatory markers, the cytokines, with breath work alone, the pro-inflammatory one had been greatly reduced. And the anti-inflammatory cytokine, interleukin 10, that one was a little bit elevated. However, when you do breath and cold, that interleukin 10 is highly elevated. But with the cold alone, it didn't really do much. However, it's not to say it doesn't affect the immune system, because going into extreme cold, it induces leukocytosis, which is more white blood cells. And in Wim's podcast, I think it was episode 2, where there's a young girl who wasn't able to continue her cancer treatment because her white blood cell count was too low. And doing the Wim Hof method, she was able to continue her treatment. Yeah.
It's amazing because, when you talk about quackery, right, it's about how information is manipulated, right, and discredited, where we have all the studies with this. You can't discredit it. They've done it at a university, you can't go, this has been done in someone's backyard, da, 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 da. But it also speaks to me, like last week, we spoke a little bit about COVID and in a different sense, but you talk about that cytokine storm and what's happening with everyone, and even the fact that you want to get locked up in your home, you know what I mean? I guess you still get your cold showers. But this is, even if you do get locked up, this is something you do in your own home, right? You don't need to go anywhere particularly. But I like to draw it out in terms of, they've changed our environment. Like they want us to be in this environment that's controlled, whereas cold and breath, you have to take yourself out of this coddled environment. What was that book that Julian mentioned last week?
The Coddling of the American Mind. There's actually I looked it up. There's actually a whole paper. It started as a paper before they made a book. But on that, Chris, you could do this anywhere.
Yeah, you could.
Doesn't matter where you are, you'll be able to do it. And that's a really good point, because I'm really big on what can you do if you have absolutely nothing. What is it that you're able to do? And I never even thought about that.
Yeah, but it's also another, I want to try to draw up a question about, I'm interested in, like, we're European descendants, right? Like if you go back in the history, there's either some sort of earthquake or asteroid hit something, and then there's a big cold snap. I think there's history of from European lines where we had to hibernate in cold. Do you know any of that history, Christina? So that we have this pathway. So trying to draw this out. So white Europeans versus African descent have different mitochondrial haplotypes, right? So we can access both heat and cold to open pathways, and they can only access predominantly heat, right? This is how the mitochondria works. So if we come from Europe or European descent, your pathways can be open with cold. I'll be corrected, hopefully correct. Someone's going to correct me on this podcast, because that was just totally off the top of my head with what I've heard. But have you heard stuff like that with a certain like Dr. Jack Kruse is a big hero of mine. I follow his work. If anyone hasn't seen Dr. Jack Kruse, but he hacked his obesity using heat and cold, and predominantly cold in the leptin pathway, which is the hunger pathway, I guess. I don't know. I'm rambling. So please add some science to my quackery.
Yeah, well, I think that touches a little bit on the study published by Christina Mesic in 2021, where she examined the body composition of Scandinavian slimmers who do hot and cold therapy, because doing cold exposure stimulates brown fat, and her hypothesis was, in stimulating that brown fat, is it possible for us to also upregulate the way it functions? And so she took a group, I think it was about 20, well, she did a few experiments with 8, with 9, with different groups of Scandinavian divers that had been swimming for at least 2 seasons, and that were only swimming about 2 to 3 times per week for a maximum of 10 minutes. And what she found is that from the cold exposure, the cold and the hot, they had actually increased their metabolic efficiency. And she explains it that when you go in the cold, so we've got brown fat and we've got white fat. And the brown fat, touching on the mitochondria, the brown fat is really rich in mitochondria. And mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, meaning this brown fat has a lot of power cells that can generate a lot of heat. And when we go into the cold, they uncouple and they go and attach into white fat, in essence, like eating away white fat and turning it into brown fat. And white fat stores the fat and energy, whereas the brown fat is actually sucking out the sugars and the fat out of the bloodstream. So what they found as well is that the Scandinavian swimmers versus the people who didn't swim, when they were looking at their blood an hour and a half after eating a sugary meal, the Scandinavian swimmers were better able to, they had less glucose in the blood because of an increased insulin resistance as a result of the cold. And because Dr. Christina Mesic research actually started in like diabetes and fat and how can we help these people, and she hypothesized that brown fat metabolic, since it helps them the metabolic efficiency, how's it affecting glucose and insulin. So
so it becomes like this energy, like super powerhouse. So anything it takes, it makes it more efficient. So whatever you take in, if you've got a lot of brown fat, it'll use that very efficiently. Is that what you're saying?
So whether you're a Scandinavian swimmer or not, we will both activate brown fat from going in the cold. However, people who do it a lot, their brown fat is supercharged, and it's working better than someone who's not training all the time. And
I've got an amazing,
it can help.
There's some historical books I've seen, even with in the south of Chile, Patagonia area, the indigenous tribes, like naked. They had like a loincloth on, they're in the snow. Like, so they're fatted, they call it fat adapted, right? Like you have an ability to live off this fat that's inside of you and create energy and heat. So they don't need any clothes, right?
Yeah. And, we think about our ancestors and how we evolved from the cold and all that, but this is inside of us and we've all got the power to get it back. It doesn't take long. But another important factor I wanted to mention, so the Wim Hof method is breath work and cold exposure, but the third pillar is mindset. And it's mindset and commitment. And that's an important one, because if you push someone into a frozen lake, a little hole in there, trust me, buddy, it'll do you some good. It won't be doing them any good if they're not prepared for it. If you're pushing someone against their will, it's not going to give them their benefits. if someone had that same mindset I had, where cold doesn't agree with me, it makes me sick, this and that, they might not get the same benefits that someone who, with an open mind, who knows more about the science and the benefits and knows it's not just a bunch of quackery. Although, just because we don't have the science to prove all the different conditions that it can help, it doesn't mean that it doesn't do that. But oh, I'm losing my train of thought here. So yeah, having a positive outview, a positive mindset on the method and what it's going to give you will intensify the benefits.
I love
I
that.
think,
I love
and
that.
I-
That's
and
crucial, I think.
I think
Sorry.
Ivy, in relation to that, like whatever you share with the audience today, they can learn, they can see videos, they can sort of incorporate that mindset shift just by watching other people have those changes. Because that's what I did. I watched videos. I remember talking to you about a month out from doing the immersion, and you said, start with some cold showers, which I sort of did 50-50. I'm like, no, I can do it. I'll just go there and go into this, ice water. But I remember in your workshop, we did a lot of breath work beforehand, and we did the yoga. So we did a couple of hours there, and it really got us into the space to go into the ice. And I was with a guy, and he said, "Oh, well," because he had two pools side by side, so we went in as with partners. So you actually could choose who you were going in with. So that was a nice part of it. You weren't just by yourself. So you had this sort of thing going on. But in hindsight, I think for me, I probably should have did a little bit more prep work, a few more cold showers, because I think when I came out, I went into the steam bath, and it took me longer to get out of that shivering phase. I was like dressed up in my big dressing gown and my coat, and everyone had already recovered by then, and I was like, what's going on with me? Because it's just such a big shock if you haven't prepared for it. So I was a little bit macho and silly. So I recommend, people just ease into it with their breath work and their showers, and then go to it, get ready for that bigger immersion in the ice.
Of all the workshops I've given, I can think of 4 instances when I've had people step out before the end of the 2 minutes, and it's really important for people to have the confidence and have the space and the respect, and that know that they're in a safe place, that it's okay to hop out before the 2 minutes, because when the body's starting to shiver like that, shiver hard, it's hard to come back. It's called the after drop. And we don't want you shivering too much when you're in the water, although we know that it won't cause irreparable damage to do a 2-minute ice bath. I would say that you felt the feelings of the after drop, and that would be an indication that we went a little bit hard, and whether we would want to bring up that temperature a little bit or reduce that time from 2 minutes to 1.5. But interestingly, out of the 4 people that stepped out a little bit earlier, one of them was the biggest guy who's ever attended my workshop. Tall, wide. He'd just been on a big health journey, and he had just finished running like either a half marathon or a triathlon. So he was a pretty impressive athlete on this big journey, and stocky guy, not overweight, but just built and tall. And it's not to say size, gender have nothing to do with it. Each person is so unique with their own experiences, their own feelings, their own ailments, what's going on inside. And so we know that 2 minutes is generally safe for people without any pre-existing conditions. But that shakes, the after drop, I felt that, and it's not a great feeling. It takes a while for the body to come back. It takes a lot of energy out of you. You end up feeling really drained.
But it is interesting, I don't interrupt, but just my after feeling. Look, I was always going to do the 2 minutes because I played like almost very high level basketball, very competitive. I was not getting out of that 2-minute bath early. I didn't feel shivering in the ice. I came out, then start to shiver. I went into the sauna, but it did wear off when I drove home. And then when I had this amazing sleep, like this, I could feel I was so warm, like
Mm,
comparatively to the outside temperature. And then I just slept amazingly. So I did have a
mm.
great benefit afterwards. And the next day as well, it felt like something had really shifted. So it was only a really short time with that drop.
The
And I,
boosted dopamine that you get from doing an ice bath will be um, long-standing. It's not just when you get out of the bath. So maybe that's why you're still feeling pretty good for the week after. My very first time I ever saw Wim Hof in Sydney, there was a day-long event in 2019, and the first ever female instructor, Dr. Tricia Smith, she said one ice bath a day or one a week is nearly as good as one a day.
because that's a good question, because I'm sometimes with personalities like mine, you think more is more and more and more and more supplements, more this, more that. But you've got to sort of go, okay, what is the most benefit? And I think the trap that I fall into is that I do it once and then it's such a big thing. I don't do it again for a long period of time, where it's the consistency of the small actions. So that's good to know. If I do it once a week, I'm fine. It's a benefit, you know.
It's I would say as well, like if you're doing one ice bath a week, that's good. If you were doing cold showers, then you could do them every day. I think the intensity of the cold and how long you go should have a part to play in your daily routine. So in Canada at the moment, I'm doing cold showers. They're easy enough to adopt. I'm doing them every day. But when I'm in Australia doing like a 3-4 degree ice bath, I might be content with 2 or 3. Some weeks I might even only do 1. But if you're going to go intense, short bursts are enough. If you're going to have a cold shower, then I try to do it every day. If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
With that dopamine, it just made me think that I can imagine this would be good for drug recovery. People who've had a lot of addictions, and even like we were saying last week, Chris, with the dopamine hit of technology, you know, because recovering dopamine is not an easy, straightforward thing. You know, it can be long, you know, lifelong issues if you have a dopamine imbalance. So that I just love this. So many
Yeah.
ideas. I'm like, wow.
I think it was on the Huberman Lab maybe that they spoke about someone recovering from addiction through that. And speaking from personal experience, even the breath work helped me. Went back in the day, I used to smoke cigarettes before my pneumonia, and doing the breath work helped me fine tune my sense of interoception. Have you heard of that word before? No, I think it's funny because even my Apple phone, when I go to write interoception, it's giving me spell check that the word doesn't exist. But if you type it into Google, I promise you it's a word, it's a sense. We think about our senses, we think about the obvious ones: sight, hearing, sound, smell, taste. But proprioception and interoception are 2 other senses you can develop. Proprioception is the ability to spatial awareness with our limbs, like a baby trying to get a bottle. They haven't yet developed that, being able to place their limbs in space, whereas interoception is the ability to feel inward, to feel your heartbeat, to feel nerves, pulses, sometimes even your organs. And so when you're doing the breath work, have you ever tried the Wim Hof method breathing before, Ivy?
No, I haven't. I will be though after this.
When you do, it's like nothing else. You feel your heartbeat so much better than you would when you're not doing this, and you feel it slow down. And you're also feeling, you've got your phrenic nerve, which is feeling the oxygen lowering, and it's sending signals. You feel like you can feel the blood swishing in your veins, and there's spasms, and you feel like you can feel your organs inside. I've never felt anything like it.
Wow.
It's like you've got a stethoscope. It's like you've got a and you can feel everything inside your body. And doing that regularly, well, I started to feel my body so much more that when I smoke, I could feel all that burn inside my lungs more so than before. And it's no wonder people who have chronic pain and people who have anxiety tend to block off the body. We tend to become very desensitized. And so by working on your interoception, it actually helps with emotional balance, emotional regulation.
Fantastic. Like my brain's like bringing all the areas. I've done a lot of developmental psychology and attachment theory. And so that's all, the emotional resilience that you build up through going through things. But of course, it makes sense that if you're going to do this stuff on a physical way, it's going to just, make everything go so much faster.
Yeah. Yeah, the signals are going both ways, like emotions, you have your emotions in your head that affect your body, but then you have emotions in the body that are affecting the head. Signals are being sent both ways. And when we're blocking off the signals because of chronic pain, because of mind substance numbing, or from being on the computer in my last jobs for the last decade, I've been at a computer for 7.5 hours, and that is also some body numbing practices. The amount of times I'm typing away and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm about to urinate in my pants because I didn't feel the urge coming in. It would happen. Or even hunger. I could work through my lunch break, not worry about it. I would rather work through my lunch than stay back an hour. So, these body numbing, it doesn't do any good. It wreaks havoc. We don't see the little signals. We don't feel the little signals from the body until it's blown up and gotten pretty bad.
You're going to have multiple workshops this year that you've planned going forward?
I've got one planned. I was doing them every couple months last year because I had a full-time job. When I go back to Australia, I won't have a full-time job. I'll be looking for work when I get back, but probably part-time. So how many Wim Hof workshops I do will probably depend on work situation. And I also dream of going to do volunteer work in Costa Rica around July, August next year. So I've decided that, half the profits from all my workshops until July, until I go traveling, will go towards an animal sanctuary. There's 2 that I'd like to go volunteer at. So whether I volunteer or donate at one or vice versa, I know that I want to double my impact. So, yeah.
Nice. And I'll definitely, through my Facebook and social media, and obviously through links on this podcast, obviously with it being local, I think last time I got the word out and a few of my connections and friends got to another workshop of yours and they were raving about it. So I'd love to keep promoting you locally because, you're having them on the Sunshine Coast. Maybe people will fly from interstate to go to the one. I know.
Well, you know what? When I applied to become a Wim Hof instructor, I had to write 200-word paragraph on what I would do to spread the word once I became an instructor. And at the time we had quite a bit, our pandemic was suicide with farmers and droughts that was going on. And so I felt like, okay, there's 1 or 2 instructors that have workshops in Brisbane on the Gold Coast, but what about the guys inland that are already under financial burden, might not have the means to travel 6 hours, put themselves up in a hotel room? So it was my dream back in 2019 to try and take my show on the road and make it more accessible to people, not just on the sunny coast. Like we mentioned, there's 3 of us instructors now, but try and go a little bit inland. So who knows? I might venture out west a little bit.
Yeah, like the roaming Wim Hof instructor to the country. No, I'm
Everyone
out,
must know.
Oh well, yeah, I'm out here in about 90 minutes west of the coast, and I met a farmer who's down the road, and he's like an osteopath, like he's like a body worker, right? But he's like, I don't know, like you'd never believe that he does this work. He's at the bottom of a dirt track, and he wanted to set his place up with the cold therapy plunge pool and da 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 da. And this is like in the back blocks of what you'd find like the most, I don't know, right-leaning political zone in Queensland.
Yeah.
And he's got all this stuff in his backyard, so you never know
Oh,
what
good.
you find and where you go. Yeah,
So did you say you're 90 minutes from the coast where you are?
yeah.
Wow, it's a bit of a
We have
hike.
to do something out here.
I'm wanting to more and more go bush. I've joined so many off-grid Facebook groups, and I think it'd be a dream to have a property with a few little chickens, a donkey, just a few little animal friends. I think a sanctuary would be my biggest dream. But yeah.
Sanctuary would be good. On that, what are the sanctuaries in Costa Rica? What do they actually do?
So the one I'm looking at, there's jaguar. It's called the Jaguar Sanctuary. Not that they necessarily hold jaguars. They take in all type of injured wildlife with the hopes of rehabilitating them and sending them back into nature. Into the wild. It's not always the case, but they look after monkeys and sloths and parrots and reptiles. Yeah, anything you would find in the rainforest down there. Yeah, so the work as well would be like maintenance and cleaning up their enclosures and sometimes facilitating medication and yeah, whatever needs to happen.
It's amazing. Yeah, also, I'll have to hook you up. I've got a friend who also lives out here who did similar type of work in Bolivia. Animal, like large cat, the ones that are going extinct. He's an ex-military, ex-army reserve guy here. So yeah, there might be some connections here. We could do something, hold a workshop or something. But yeah, it's definitely required. It's definitely needed. It's definitely something that I want to take up again. And I've started to turn the cold down on the shower. But did you say not to worry about it in summer with the cold? Is that what you said?
I don't think there is any such thing as a cold shower in Queensland in summer. Anyone who tells me they take a cold shower, if they've got something fancy on their water tank, that I'm yet to find cold water in Queensland in the summer. I've never experienced it. Maybe where you are.
Oh yeah, we get we get a lot of cold days. I do love it because my shower doesn't work properly, so I go hot and cold anyway, just the way that it is. And when it's hot, it's like it's such a relief. We don't get, our hot days are random, so it's like because you don't feel the cold then,
And you're in Geelong, hey?
Yeah,
that's where you are, and I'm in Queensland, where the humidity is off the charts. So when you are doing cold, it's not really cold. So I need to go to ice, really.
I've seen people actually use a strainer. They've connected the strainer to their shower head and plopped some ice cubes in there and then showered like that. You got, turn down the lower pressure so that it just trickles over. You can probably get a little bit more of a cold shower that way. But if you do have a bath, for me, I found just filling up whatever containers you've got around the house, putting them in the freezer as the days go along, pop out the blocks, refill, and like an Eskimo stockpile your little ice blocks. And then at the end of the week, have an ice bath that way. That's what I found was easiest, but I get that not everyone has a bath. If not, try the overhead hanging basket thing. But TLC recovery, if anyone's on the coast, is really, really good. That was one of my stepping stones, and they've opened up a couple more centers. There's a recovery room. They actually have like cold water. It's -7. So if you are looking at doing the Wim Hof method and experimenting with gradual cold exposure, because that's what it's called. The pillar is called gradual cold exposure. So I would recommend TLC first the pool's kept at 12 to 14. And if you want to kick it up, then you can try the recovery room in Book Arena at the sporting complex. And I think they might also have cryo chambers there, although I've never tried them myself. A cold plunge is the best.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can find places like that around the country. I know in our business networking group, there's a couple of organizations in Sydney. That's a good idea. The question I was going to ask is like temperature controlling your ice baths. I know when you go and do an immersion with you, it's like 2 degrees, but I guess we could use a thermometer or something.
Yeah.
Just to work out how we're like just graduating into that zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to try and get myself in a gradual state, not the full on, just put myself in a really bad position like I did. I don't know, it's something in my mindset that needs to shift. It's like, it's almost like,
You did it. You did it, and you're all the better for it, and more prepared, and know that maybe 7-8 degrees is might be a better spot. You'll find I've got like a thermometer, and I found that the water would normally keep around 6-7 degrees doing that. Or if you're buying bags of ice, 3 to 4 bags of ice would get my tub down to about 6 degrees.
do you have any more questions to ask? I think we've covered it.
I was wanting to, Christina, you said that you were going to do some example breaths. Are we able to run through that?
Do some example breaths.
Yes. So for people to do at home to get started.
Do the breath work. Yeah, do an actual, sure, we can. So anyone who'd like to follow along, it's preferable to do lying down, but you can do it seated so long as there's nothing around you that you can hit. It's unlikely, but doing breath work, there is a chance that you could lose consciousness temporarily, briefly. So you can't ever do this driving a vehicle, operating heavy machinery, nowhere near a body of water. So if you're set and safe, what I'll have you do is,
shall we do it? Actually, I might do it, Chris. And if I pass out, you take over, make sure
we'll all do it together.
Okay.
Well, I'll speak, and if you want to follow along. So I want you to take a deep breath, and you're going to try and send the air down into your belly, then filling up the chest before you let it go. I want you to take a full deep breath in, almost 100% breath in, but when you exhale, it's just a release. I don't want you to hold the air. I don't want you to restrict the flow. It's just a nice gentle exhale, a full breath in, and we let go. When you take your breath in, try to focus on not tensing the jaw, not tensing the shoulders or the neck. You want to keep your body relaxed. So if you're ready now, we'll have you take 30 deep breaths. So deep breath in. Deep breath in, into the belly, into the chest, letting it go. That's 4, 5, 6. As you breathe in and out, I don't want you to pause at the top or at the bottom. You want a nice, steady flow in and out. You might find that you're feeling a little bit tingly in your fingers and in your feet. That's perfectly normal. You might feel a little bit lightheaded. Perfectly normal. You might feel a little change in temperature on the skin. Perfectly normal. None of these sensations are permanent, and if anything gets too much on you, you simply need to regain your steady breath. In through the nose and out through the mouth. Constant flow in and out. And if you have the ability to, it's nice to try to picture yourself traveling into your body, into your nose, traveling with the air into your lungs, reaching all the extremities of your body, and then coming back out with that waste gas, that carbon dioxide. Now, Ivy and Chris, I'll have you do 3 more deep breaths. This last one, deep breath in, letting it go. Hold at the bottom, holding at the bottom, and I'll have you hold for 1 minute. Holding our breath. Feel the sensations inside. Feel your heartbeat as it slows down. Feel your blood and the oxygen pulsing through the body. Feel the tingles. Just feel. We're getting out of our heads and into our bodies. And during this pause, there's wonderful things happening. Rush of adrenaline. Anti-inflammatory proteins are flooding the body. Our bloodways are expanding and constricting with the exchange of gases. If you haven't already done so, I invite you now to take a deep breath in and hold it for 15, 14, 13, 12. And that's your first round done. You held your breath for a minute?
Yes.
Do you feel like do you feel like you could have gone longer?
Yeah, I could have. But I was a competitive swimmer, and so my
Oh.
lungs are very strong holding my breath. But what was interesting, that rapid, because I've always hold my breath at either end. That was interesting, not holding it, because that's my, I wouldn't say instinct, but that's what I've trained to do.
Yeah.
So I could swim 50 meters underwater
Wow.
as a teenager. So yeah, but that's totally different. It's using the breath in a very different way.
So when you're swimming, you are triggering the mammalian reflex, splashing water on your face, relaxing the body to try and slow down how much carbon dioxide you're producing, because the carbon dioxide is the trigger for you to want to breathe. Mm-hmm. By doing the deep breathing, we've expelled so much carbon dioxide that the urge to breathe is delayed. And this is why it gets dangerous if you do it underwater, because normally the urge to breathe and when you faint, there's quite a gap between the two. However, if you are tricking the gases, expelling that carbon dioxide, the point when the urge to breathe and the passing out are going to be very close together, and that's very risky. That's when you think you've got air to surface. Whoops, you don't. You pass out because your body has a natural defense mechanism. It won't let you suffocate yourself. If you were trying to do breath work and holding your breath and you're going too far, your body will make you pass out. Send a signal to your diaphragm to make it constrict and make you take a big gulp of air. If you're underwater, air in your lungs will kill you. So the reason why we exhale before doing the breath hold is that when there's a few reasons. When we're breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, your nose generates a lot of nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide is processed by the body. It's a vasodilator. My grandmother takes nitroglycerin pills because nitroglycerin is processed by the body, turned into nitric oxide, which helps to open up the vessels, the bloodways, the passageways. So when you're doing your deep breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, you're generating a lot of nitric oxide. And when you exhale first, when comes the urge to breathe, you're just taking in that hit of nitric oxide right away, rather than going, rather than expelling it and then breathing in. Do you understand?
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and we're also trying to lower our oxygen, because by lowering the oxygen, that's when you turn your body hypoxic. And the Nobel Prize in Medicine a few years ago was granted to 3 doctors for having discovered this protein, HIF, that's released when the body is under very low in a low oxygen availability environment. And HIF helps with the upregulation of another protein called EPO. And EPO is what some athletes have taken to dope and cheat and enhance their performance. So by doing the breath work and turning hypoxic, which is when we're lowering the oxygen availability for the body. So you don't want to trap a big breath of oxygen, because we're trying to get rid of the oxygen, because it's in the low oxygen availability that the body is outside of its comfort zone and has to regulate. Okay, I'm losing oxygen. I need more proteins. I need more passageways. I need more red blood cells. So where ice baths generate more white blood cells, the breath work generates more red blood cells, because the red blood cells carry the oxygen. So your brain registers a low oxygen, sends a message down to your bone marrow to make it produce more red blood cells, thinking you need more, you don't have enough oxygen. But it's only for a short period of time, a short controlled acute stress to make us stronger, hormetic stress.
Wow, there's so much to this. That's just, the intelligence of the human body is actually amazing.
Yeah, I struggle in trying to say it in a nice, organized fashion. I run all over the place a little bit. I get so excited.
Which is great. You can tell you're very passionate about this.
Yes.
It reminds me when I was doing Wim Hof breathing in the book, when he guides you through the rounds like that, how easy it was, and the reason why I was able to hold the breath up to like 3 minutes. Yeah, you get into that delayed response, and I was just lying there going, don't need to breathe, just feel it. And you're just in this other world of sensation. So yeah, try that, Ivy. Go to, like, lie on the bed and do, like, how many rounds? Because we just did 1 round. I think in the book I was doing like 3 or 4 rounds, maybe 3 rounds.
They do recommend 3 to 4 rounds. 3 to 4 rounds is best, but the best practice is one you'll actually stick to. So if you can only do 1 a day, it's better to do 1 a day than to only do your 3, like once a week, because you can't find time for it, but 3 to 4 is best, because as you go into further rounds, you'll be able to hold your breath longer and reduce your oxygen saturation even more. And although you can still gain the benefits without the retention phase, that is where you're getting the biggest spike of adrenaline, and that's the increase in adrenaline correlates with the anti-inflammatory properties, proteins, as well as other good stuff. So
with that, would you do it in the morning? Oh, sorry. So with the adrenaline, you do it in the morning rather than at nighttime?
I was doing it when I woke up.
Breath work is best in the morning. 1, because you've got an empty stomach. And when we're doing belly breathing, although the term might make you think like you're breathing into your belly, you're not. Your diaphragm is dropping down, and there's nowhere for your gut to go other than out. So when you've got an empty stomach, it's easier for that diaphragm to go up and down. And we don't want shallow, we like to stick away from the word hyperventilating, because hyperventilating can often be really quick and shallow and intense. Rather, we want deep breathing, because then we're activating the diaphragm, getting that movement, and helping with lung expansion, which helps with longevity and overall health. As well, when you get that diaphragm movement, it's also, as I said, it's squishing your organs and your stomach. So you're actually getting an internal organ massage when you do that. And so when you're doing breath work and getting that adrenaline surge, the adrenaline is coming from 2 places, from your brain and also from your above the kidney, the adrenal glands sitting on top of the kidney. So when you're moving your diaphragm up and down, you're even getting that stimulation of your kidneys to try and help get even more adrenaline. One tip when you're doing it at home alone, on your 29th or 39th breath, depending if you go to 30 or to 40, on the second last one, although I've been telling you to just let go of your breath, on the second last one, you should let go with force.
Okay.
And then let go. I didn't include that step because I didn't want to put too many instructions and make it hard, but by forcing out the air and really forcing that diaphragm movement, that contraction, it helps with getting a little bit extra adrenaline, helps to squeeze the adrenal glands in there. So in the morning, empty stomach, because your diaphragm can move better. Also, once you start eating, you're starting the process of digestion, and blood flow is being directed to your stomach for that. And during breath work, that's not where we want. It's interfering with the process. We're trying to put you into two states of fight or flight and a rest, digest, recuperate, and digestion, food in the stomach is going to get in the way of that. Also, coffee is not going to help. We're playing with the pH of the blood. It's quite scientific. We won't go into too much about that, but it's best to avoid caffeine and food before eating. I prefer to do it in the morning. However, it's put me to sleep. I fell asleep in the auditorium with Wim, December 2019. I think I was up into my 5th round when I fell asleep. I had also gotten up at 3-4 o'clock in the morning to catch a flight to Sydney for this event, head back home the same day. It was a lovely birthday present for me. But if you want to do it at night, because that's when it suits you best, you might find that it puts you in a state of relaxation. The majority of people it does. For some people, the fight or flight is a little bit intense, especially people who are anxious. So yeah, in the morning is best. 3 to 4 rounds are best, but if you've only got time for one is still better than none.
I think I'm going to change my morning routine.
Well,
my
as soon as you wake up.
Yeah, well, normally I wake up, I have my signaling molecules, and then I might do this, and then I'll go make my breakfast or my coffee, because then I tend to just naturally fast. So I'm glad you added that in, because that's usually my first step. So
oh, right. Good advice. And also it's
maybe we can add in the show notes. We're doing show notes, Ivy? We sussed it out. So we could maybe find a video that guides through, something like that. Like
I've got the link. I'll send it to you.
Cool.
Fantastic. Awesome. Yeah, so we'll have that underneath. So on YouTube we'll have that. And are we able to put a link in for the Facebook group as well? Because I'm thinking, so with the emphysema, I know someone who has emphysema, and just intuitively I feel that this would be really good. So I imagine there might be examples in.
Yes. That's the best way to go about it. There's so many people that have shared their stories, and like suffering from someone with anxiety, I've sort of steered towards those type, the ones that resonate with me. My stepbrother died of a drug overdose. To hear someone cured himself of his drug of choice or whatever, it's those stories are a bit, they stay with you. But the Wim Hof book has a lot of good anecdotal stories, and that the Facebook group, and we will definitely good spot to share. Yeah,
fantastic.
And we'll have links to your next event, right? And your offering things.
When is that again, Christina?
I'm doing it on Saturday the 4th from 9:30 in the morning till 1:30 in the afternoon.
4th of
Saturday the 4th of February.
Okay, so people in Victoria may be able to come up, though Victorians tend to come up in winter. They tend to go to, because it's too cold and we need some sunshine. So maybe if you could run one in our winter, that would be good. Probably get a lot of people from here going up.
Yeah. I've got in-laws in Melbourne, and lots of family friends at what's the little island with the penguins?
Phillip Island.
And for years, I'd go down there and I'd refuse to go swimming. The water was too cold. And now I'm like, I love it. You guys have got great water, like 12 degrees. You walk in, it's nice and cold. I'm like, oh yeah. Then I'm like, oh, I'm getting used to it. Then I get out of it, wait till I warm up, and I go back in. And it took me like the better part of a decade living in Australia to be able to appreciate cold water in Melbourne.
Well, I haven't actually been for a while into the cold ocean, actually for a couple of years. And he's saying that, I'm like, why haven't I done that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
because it's around me everywhere. There's cold water everywhere around me. Even at this time of year, even though it's been a little bit warmer, the water's still cold. You have to have a few days of heat before it starts to warm up.
And that's the thing, just to like bring it back to current situation with immune issues and viruses and people getting a bunch of stuff. If it gives you more immune resilience, I mean, it's a huge, huge thing, you know, and you're adapted, your immune system becomes more adapted to stress, right? So that proves, right, when they injected him with endotoxin, you know, he had an adaptation in his immune system, right? This is huge for like the current day, like seriously.
Yeah, the body's ability to react to stress is like, what's the word? It's so like primal, it's so basic, you know?
We're not taught that. That's been taken away. That's the knowledge that's been taken away. And then we're in a humidified, air-conditioned, temperature-controlled place. So you have to take your medications and da-da-da-da. Like we've lost the knowledge. So thank you for bringing that, you know, in this podcast to look, let's go back to primal, you know, go back to the pathways. And I have to maybe not put it in the show notes, but I want to send you the link to Dr. Jack Kruse's work where he biohacked his obesity. And I have to send it to you, Ivy. And he actually did a hack on himself. And I'd love to get him on our podcast. I don't know how, but I'd love to pray. But he did.
We'll
He's a neurosurgeon. He did a TED talk where he hacked, biohacked himself with cold, but he did elective plastic surgery on himself where they sucked fat out of his torso.
Wow.
Under no anesthetic and no painkillers after, and went into ice.
Oh my.
Right? This is crazy. He did it. He does a TED talk, right? It's a 12-minute TED talk, and he shows exactly how he used your stuff to the extreme. And then he took that into his neurosurgeon, his work, his profession, where after they had spinal surgeries and he did the neurosurgery, he had them on freezing cold sheets for hours. And they didn't need none of their medication.
Wow.
This guy's the extreme. So if you haven't seen Dr. Jack Kruse, I'll send you guys a link to that. Yeah, it's just amplifies. I just watched it last week. I'm like, this guy took that and he took it to the nth degree. And then he took it to his hospital as a neurosurgeon and then started to integrate it into his practice. Proper quack.
That's what I was just thinking. That's what we call a quack.
And you know what? For 20 years, Wim was a quack. He was. Has anyone ever seen any footage of him on shows? It's not Ripley's Believe It or Not, but there's some footage out there where you see a young Wim and people are like, oh, and you do this, and they're like kind of looking at the
circus
audience,
freak, you know?
Like asking him questions, but really like mocking him. And he believed in what he was doing with that. Like he never strayed away, no matter how people treated him and ridiculed him. But that when the science came out, like there's a video showing, you can see he's so emotional, I think, like in tears, just because like finally this is like validating what I've been saying for all these years. And there's a quote about like the great ones knew they were great before everyone else did, you know?
Yes. I was actually just thinking that, isn't that a sad reflection on where we're at as a society, where we can't trust our innate knowledge and the evidence in front of us. We need to outsource this to, scientists to get it back to us for us to believe what we see. Maybe not us, but and it is a really sad reflection that we need that really sanitized feedback.
Yeah.
But I'm glad he got it.
Yeah.
And we can use that, but that's perfect. That's exactly what we're about to say, hey, let's bring back this knowledge that's lost, or they've want to, what did we say last week, want to homogenize and envelop into their system and take the edge off it. We've got to be very careful of that and make sure
and disempower, because this is empowering people within themselves to take responsibility. You don't need to go and get something to improve your immune system. If you've got this routine in your life that's already doing that, and all the other benefits, it's just wonderful. I love this. I didn't think I was going to get so much out of this, because I'm aware of Wim Hof, but I've never looked into it. I think it's fantastic.
That's the music to my ears, Ivy. I will go to sleep very well tonight, knowing that I've convinced at least one person to look further into it.
And my youngest 9-year-old, she's in the room here with me, and she was just doing the breath work with us. So I don't know if it's okay for children, but I'm sure she'll be doing it with me. She loves this stuff.
I would just be concerned with the maturity, because in a sense of being able to hold your breath that long seems like a really cool thing, and I'd be afraid of where children might want to take it. But that you're a good mom, and I'm sure you'll be able to instill safety in your little one. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. If there's any, I guess it'd just be coming down to any extra links, and if we can get maybe a booking link for when you're running your event where people can find more about you, we'll have all that underneath. And I think I encourage people to ask questions as well, any questions that people have after watching this. So we'll have it on YouTube and also on a range of different podcasting platforms. But I guess on YouTube is a good place to ask the questions, because then people can get answers on. So maybe if we get questions, we'll let you know, and then
please do, of course. My teacher, when I was becoming an instructor, she told us to emphasize why comfort is killing us. You find me someone who's never failed at something, I'll show you someone who's never tried anything new, and you only get better and stronger from.
And that's what we need to keep doing, because we have been conditioned to, especially in this country. Life has just been so easy, and we want to go back to that ease, but for me, the reality of the last few years has given me more of an edge on life, and the things that I used to think were challenging, I just look at and go. And I've always been someone who likes to challenge myself too, but the sheer reality of what we're going through as a society, I find awful but exhilarating at the same time, because there's so much more meaning to having to get through what we're having to get through.
And that's the reason why we did this. The reason why we're doing this podcast, right? Because we've been challenged. They've thrown down the gauntlet. I never would have thought Facebook. I was thinking last night, never would have thought Facebook was a nice little platform where I sent pictures to my grandma. Not be super imposed upon and then censored and
Yes.
What the hell?
Yes.
What is going on? Anyway, and that's what we face. So that's why we wanted to do this, to draw experts out where it is getting censored, so we give them a platform to express exactly what you're doing today.
And it's a solution. There's a lot of people out there talking about the problems.
Yes.
And I have these conversations with people all the time, but we've got to awaken people have got to see. And I'm like, and then what? You awaken people? Who's doing anything? Like what are the solutions to this? So and I think that this one is, I just feel that this is so empowering for people, because it is so simple. People can start this at home in a few minutes and start making a change in their life. And that's, thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Oh, you're welcome. Chris, thanks for reaching out, for thinking of me. And Ivy, thanks for teaming up with Chris for creating this great podcast. You've got a beautiful mission. And if it's not too personal, my asking before we end this, the sample answers that were in the email, are they actually what happened to you? Are they your story?
Yes. Yes, they are. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That would make me cry. Yeah. So I had a podcast when I was recovering from long COVID. 2 years ago I started that, and it was my recovery. It is available on YouTube, where I was giving a platform to people with long COVID to talk about, but I started that project as my brain recovery. So, but it's fascinating, like this week where I've been setting up all the platforms and linking everything together. I couldn't do that. It took me 6 months, and I still couldn't do it on the last podcast. And I did it all in a few days this time. And it's that sense of like, wow, I can think. And I've done a lot of things to improve my brain, but I can make those connections which I couldn't do. I mean, I could barely talk, and talk coherently. I lost so many words. And that's the thing. There's so many people out there who, friends I made back then in the long COVID community. Some of them have unfortunately died. Some of them are still really, really, really sick, and I'm grateful that I had the resources and I guess the drive I had to get better. So I might share that story again some other time on this.
We'll have to reverse it. Yeah, we'll interview
you.
We'll
We'll
be
interview each
interviewed.
other.
I struggled a lot last year because I had pressure from in-laws, from colleagues, from my psychologist, from my husband. Everyone's telling me to do it. And there was a time when I was so afraid for people's human rights and people's ability to choose, because I don't have any children. And if my work said either you get or you leave, I had the choice because I had the finances to support myself, but other people didn't. And when they were saying, we don't want to have to put in, so do your part, everyone get, I thought maybe I won't say anything and I'll just get to prevent from coming in, because it was the one thing I dreaded was Pete. And then the interview came out with Jacinta when they said, Jacinta, why are you bringing in the now that we've surpassed 90%? It's like you're not doing it for more to entice rates, but rather it's to create two classes of people, one with rights, one with not. And she said, that's exactly what I'm doing. I want people to have confidence to go back out and know that they're not around persons. And that interview changed everything for me. And from that point on, I was like, if I don't stand up, like there's going to be no one left standing. So I decided to go against everyone around me and
well
not
done.
get
Well done.
and
Yeah, and I think that's harder for a lot of people when it is. I mean, in my life, it was never an option, so it was easy for me, and I'm not surrounded by people who would do that. I've got family, but I think it is a lot harder if your friends were all doing that. I'm, the way that I live my life, and the people I surround myself with are generally the sort of people who didn't anyway. So I think it was a lot harder. But that's fascinating that counter what they were trying to achieve had the opposite effect in you.
Thank you for this great opportunity for getting the word out about Wim Hof. Happy New Year. Have a great day.
You too. Enjoy Canada.
See when you get
Enjoy
back
your time off.
See when you get back to Australia. Definitely catch up.
You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok by searching for Coffee